you meet someone and it touches something in you, you learn a lot, and you go, oh, that's really interesting. The idea of art in general is that I think it helps us understand the world around us, and it helps question the world around us. The most important piece, without which none of this, I think, applies or is relevant, is authenticity. I think an artist is ultimately someone who needs to have a really clear vision of the world from their perspective.
So the younger version of you, if there was a piece of advice, or a woman that's maybe starting her career, what piece of advice would you give?
I would say
she's a culture force and a creative visionary who's helped shape the identity of the Dubai art scene for the past 10 years. On this episode of the Kelly Lundberg Podcast, I'm joined by Benedetta, the Executive Director of Art Dubai and an influential voice in the region's most creative landscape. We talk about the power of art and storytelling, how culture is created, and what's next when it comes to the creativity of leadership. Whether you're a collector, a creative, or just curious about what art means in a city like Dubai, then this is the conversation for you.
Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
thank you for having me.
This has been a long time coming. I've been communicating with your team. I really wanted to explore more into the art world, into your brand leadership, and just everything that's come together. So why don't you give everyone who's watching and listening a little bit of a backstory as to who you are?
Thank you so much. I'm Benedetta Ghione. I'm the Executive Director of Art Dubai, and that means, I guess, that I put the fair together, and I also look after some of our other programming that's now become very much year-round.
Love it. So what got you into this space then? Or how did you start? Have you always been interested in art?
I think I have quite a kind of consistent trajectory.
Yeah.
I grew up in a family of art lovers and collectors. I've always been, I guess, taught about the importance of art and culture. That's something that I remember from the youngest stages, whether it was traveling and visiting, every church in Venice, or really kind of making the time. And most of our family travel was centered around museum visits, etc. So I think that's something that's always been there in my mind, in my upbringing. I studied the history of art. I thought it was really interesting. I thought I may want to be a journalist or something like that. But in terms of subject matter, art and history of art seemed really relevant. And then I started working in an auction house where I was for many years. I became a specialist and trained as one. I then worked in art galleries and again in auction houses. And eventually that led me here to Dubai and to Art Dubai.
So did you come for the position of Art Dubai here?
I did. I came for Art Dubai. I came for a position that's many versions of my role ago. So my role has evolved over time.
Because it's been, what, 10 years?
Yes,
Yeah?
absolutely. Coming up to 10 years. But yes, I came for Art Dubai.
So Art Dubai is on the calendar in the art world. Like it's come so far from, 19 years we were talking about? Nearly 20 years?
Absolutely.
From what it was to what it is now, you've been with the evolution of the brand, I guess, of Art Dubai. How did it start and what is it now?
I think in many ways what's interesting about it is that although it's evolved and it's grown, I would say very much in line with how Dubai, the city, has evolved and grown and its identity has developed. In many ways, its DNA has been there since the beginning. So I think the fair has always wanted to be, as I was saying, representative of the city. So this idea of being a gateway of discovery, of being a place of meeting between East and West, of being a place where you can see a lot of different art from all over the world, so kind of reflecting the cosmopolitan nature of the city. That's been there since the beginning. And I think the other thing that's been there since the beginning, which is quite unique, is the model of it. So although it's a commercial platform and it's an art fair at the heart of it, it's always had an extensive non-commercial program. So talks, art commissions, conferences, workshops, towards this idea of really taking our community and our audience on a journey with us, meeting people where they are, making the material really accessible. That's something that's always been there, and I think is quite unique.
When we talk about art, and I think, people might assume, or maybe that's just me, that when we think of art, we think of, paintings, but art is so much more than that. And I think certainly when I walked through the Dubai Financial District, I think maybe it could have been when there was something, there was a lot of sculptures, and there was so many galleries down there that it's beyond just what's on the wall. It's so much more. Can you elaborate maybe more eloquently than I just have there?
No, I think that's perfectly eloquent. Absolutely. I think, the idea of art in general is that I think it helps us understand the world around us, and it helps question the world around us. And a big part of that is the question of what is art, right? What does it look like materially? As you mentioned, is it a sculpture? Is it a painting? Is it a work of digital art? Is it a piece of writing? Is it a performative piece that uses the body as the canvas and the medium? I think these are all really interesting questions. And then meaning, what is this trying to tell us? What is this about? Where is the artist driving at? And what kind of journey are they trying to bring us on with them?
I think there's in that the storytelling, all I'm hearing is storytelling. So yes, you've got the piece of art itself, but it's got to be able to tell a story. To what level do you look at that when you're working with art galleries to curate the type of artists that are coming in, the story they're telling as an artist and as an art gallery, I suppose?
We look at that tirelessly. It's what a lot of our great team that looks after social media and communications thinks about all the time, because the layers can be very overt or quite hidden and sometimes, sophisticated. So what you're really trying to think about is, how do I convey the message of the piece and of the artist, and how do I try and bridge gaps where they may exist, or how do I present the work in the case that the content is quite self-explanatory. And how do you balance both, right? Some work may look like it's about something, and that something may be very obvious, but actually it's about something else, so you're kind of going, okay, how do I show both of these things? And then other work, I think, has really kind of layered levels of meaning, and what you're trying to do with that, as you're mentioning, is really tell a story and bring people on the journey with you, and not have, sometimes the reaction that people may have, which is, oh, but this is like a white canvas, what is this about? And I don't get it. We really try and work to kind of debunk some of these myths and to bring people on the journey. And then another layer, I guess, is when you're presenting art that is as global and cosmopolitan as the one that we do at Art Dubai, is you're trying to give context, right? Because a lot of the time artists are referring to moments in their life, or societal moments, or historical moments that are relevant to their context, their circumstances, their geography. And what you're trying to do there is give that interpretative note to people, saying, actually, this is what this particular symbol may be about, or this is what the artist was thinking about. This is the photograph that they took as example or source, and you're trying to give them all these tools. It's a bit of kind of detective work sometimes.
And education, like a huge part of educating why that person thinks like that or does that thing. So I suppose that leads me into my next question. I don't know if you can answer this. Is how does someone define what's good art then? I mean, is it the emotional piece? Is it what it looks like? Is it all of that? Is it the story they tell? Is it how they come across? Because you see people all the time, well, I don't think that's very good. And then other people look at it for such a long time going, this is incredible. What's your take on it?
I think that's an excellent question. And it's one that certainly keeps us very preoccupied. And we argue a lot in the office.
Yeah.
Personally, I think one thing that I always try to bear in mind is not to have a preconceived notion that something is definitely good art and something is definitely bad art. I think sometimes the art world is a bit at fault of kind of believing its own hype to a fault. Yeah. I think it's important to keep an open mind. But broadly speaking, I guess I would say that as with all things, there's an element of consensus, right? So there are trackers that the art world looks at in terms of the development of an artist's career. Who are they represented by in terms of gallery? Who do they work with? Who do they surround themselves by? Which is similar to many other industries, but in our case, it would be galleries. Who are their patrons? Who collects the work? Who supports the work? As privates, but also as institutions. You know, what museum institutions are they included in? Which exhibitions are they part of? There are some kind of key markers and moments that are the sort of Oscars, I would say, of the art world. Things like inclusion in the Venice Biennale is a very important marker. So I'd say that over time, and sometimes in, you know, when you're looking back and in reverse, you can dot all of these points and see that a career has evolved in a certain way, and that leads you to the conclusion that this is good art, with the obvious ups and downs that all careers experience, and art is no different.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, and all I hear in that aspect is, but they've got to work on their brand. You know, they've got to, an artist has got to be able to do good collaborations, stand out. So an art gallery would want to have them. Who are their connections? How are they telling stories? I see that from the artist perspective, going, wow, as much as their focus is the art piece that they're working on, their brand piece, to be someone that is chosen to be in an art gallery, because your style and the model for Art Dubai is, it's the gallery that you work with rather than individual artists. So first of all, the artist needs to be chosen by the gallery, and that, I think, a huge part comes from a personal brand and visibility. If there's someone that's listening that is in that space, what would you say to them? And I think that's a lot from your personal experience as well. What are some of the things they could be doing, as well as fine-tuning what they're so good at?
Everything you've said makes perfect sense and is correct. I think the most important piece, without which none of this, I think, applies or is relevant, is authenticity. And I think an artist is ultimately someone who needs to have a really clear vision of the world from their perspective. And the work is about conveying that vision of the world and taking people on that journey, or allowing them to consider what that journey might look like. Meaning that an artist is someone who may help you see lives other than your own, or feel like you are in lives other than your own. I think that's kind of the superpower to me of all artistic disciplines. I would include music, I would include film, I would include performative arts and fine art in that. Yeah. And so I think at the base of it all, if there was just the one thing that you definitely have to do, is to hone in on that and to really find that. And I think to stay focused on that whilst you do all of these other things, because of course, you could be the most spectacular artist, but if you're locked away in your basement and no one knows the work, which has happened not just once, then that work won't be shared. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it doesn't mean it's not powerful, but it wouldn't be shared. So I feel like the branding, the communicating, the sharing and the expanding is very important, but at the heart of it, I think you have to really know what it is you're trying to say and to do, especially when you then meet the world, right? Because the world is loud, and the world will tell you, make it bigger, smaller, more purple, more pink, and you have to know. And I'd say that one of the things about good art, back to your previous question, is that it holds a line, which doesn't mean that the practice is always the same. it might change, even quite dramatically sometimes, but the vision of the artist remains quite true and really doesn't get hugely swayed by what's happening around them and the noise.
I think that authenticity piece is so crucial, yet so many people find being authentic hard. And I want to bring that into, okay, artists need to find their authenticity, but how, as a team, do you bring your team that are all individual? They've all got that, because art is subjective. They've all got to have a love, I imagine, into it. How do you lead with authenticity in the art space, to switch it around a little bit?
We have an incredible team who are like my great passion. I think they're fantastic. They are by and large a young team. And I think that's really relevant and important. They are people who, as you say, are passionate about culture. And I think a big piece of it is trying to convey why what we do makes a difference and why it has impact. I think it's really easy to get caught up in the idea that Art Dubai is a glamorous event, which it is, right? It's a kind of hot ticket in town, patrons preview that people like to go to. And that is really important, because I think the feeling of energy of an event is a thing, right? Making something that people want to be part of and want to be at is important and relevant, because that's how you get the eyeballs, the attention, and the care of your extended community. But I think what is also really important is conveying what the lasting impact is of that. Because, as I was mentioning at the beginning, the fact that we've always run the event hand in hand with extensive programming, that we've looked at education, we've had thought leadership, we've done educational programming year round. We run with some, for example, with one of our partners there I'm holding, we have a children's program that goes into, more than 100 schools and teaches arts education. That is a byproduct of the FAIR platform. It's something that has happened as a consequence of the FAIR growing and being a successful event. But what it's actually doing is providing education to children, to thousands of children across Dubai and actually across the UAE, the 7 Emirates. And I think the team and I get a lot of meaning out of that, because otherwise, you would be working towards this event and then it would be over and you'd have a sense of, okay, well, we start again. But actually, it's not something that appears and disappears. It's in that way, it's not like the circus model. It has the magic of the circus model and of that moment in time that's really special, but it also has lasting impact and it has roots and it builds things that remain in the ecosystem.
So I think that's a great way of keeping the team together on not just the big point, because I think when you do a big once a year event, there can be that tendency that you say afterwards going, oh, it's over and then let's think about it, whereas you've got the consistency of being able to bring something beyond, I say beyond Art Dubai, but the legacy, I guess, of what Art Dubai and the platform is able to do beyond just the, what is it, a week or is it 2 weeks now?
It's 5 days.
5 days. Oh,
yes.
yeah, okay, so 5 days. I think, or see things around. So it's 5 days, but it takes the whole year to organize it. How do you keep coming up with something that gets people coming back? Because I think that in business, how do you get your clients to keep returning?
A big chunk of it is changing every year, right?
Okay.
Because the galleries select different materials. So the artwork that you will see is going to be different year on year. Hopefully also because it will have been sold the prior year.
Yeah.
And for that, we also work with curators. So we have different sections. We have contemporary, we have modern, we have Bawab, and we have digital, Art Dubai Digital. And we work with curators who are tastemakers in those particular areas of specialty. And they help curating what is going to be an exciting, a fresh, and a meaningful selection. So your gallery halls are kind of renewed and refreshed yearly. Around that, we then plan our program. So that's the talks, it's the art commissions, it's the events, it's the social element, it's the programs that we run for specific subgroups and audiences, so curators or collectors, people who fly in specifically for the fair. And what we try to do with that is, I guess, as with every brand, if you will, it's a balance of remaining true to yourself, because no one wants to come to something that they come to because they like it and feel like they don't find that DNA anywhere. And they're like, what is this? Like, this is really confusing. But also inject freshness and difference. I'd say in this we're helped by the growth of the city, because the city is growing so much, culturally and generally, that there are new things happening. So then what we try to do is we showcase some of the DNA of the fair, the formats, the way that we do our talks, our workshops, our education, follow formats that we feel are tried and tested and work. But the content is constantly evolving. And we try and show people essentially what's new and what's exciting year on year.
What do you think are some of the misconceptions? You know, you're leading in the art world, you with your team to keep innovating, but also Art Dubai. What are some of the misconceptions you think that people might have out there about
art?
Yeah, well, no, I think art would be quite general. I think maybe more as maybe you as a leader innovating or keeping it fresh in what you're doing.
A big misconception around working in the art world is how glamorous people think it is. And it is glamorous some of the time, but it's also a lot of hard and detailed work. It's essentially probably 100,000 item checklist, right? Running a once a year event as a team means a universe of tiny details that, however tiny they may appear to one person, will be very, very crucial and important to the other. And I should say that we are the representatives and the keepers of a constellation of stakeholders, right? Of galleries that invest a huge amount of money and time and energy in choosing our platform and in choosing to take part in the fair. In the artists that they represent, for whom an art fair is a very important moment of exposure and communication, and also a commercial platform. For our partners who also invest in the platform, who support it, and who, in supporting the platform, are sharing a vision of being patrons of the arts. For our extended network of stakeholders, who may be, you know, the press, other institutions, the galleries that are based in Dubai. It's essentially a universe of many people for whom, to different degrees, that week is meaningful and important. And so you're trying to hold all of that. And I'd say that really is the work. The parties are great, and the glamour of it exists, but I'd say that the secret sauce of what we do as a team is the care that I see people putting into these things day in, day out. And it's quite hard, right? Because no one sees that, right? You know, today we're like minus 9 days, for example, from the event, right? And there would be a human tendency to go, okay, do we really have to, you know, pick at this thing as closely as we are? But I think it shows in the end result. No one will ever know, you know, how particular we've been over one thing or the other. And in many instances, it might not be noticed by the untrained eye. But I think that care ends up coming across, and it's a way of seeing the work that we do.
What's one thing that you do as a leader and someone who's been in the role for the last 10 years that you think makes you stand out, or your team stay with you, or, you know, something that is uniquely you?
I'm Italian and I have small children, and it's not easy, you know, being a mother of small children. And working the hours that I do. And I think one thing that I've learned to do over time has been to show that vulnerability and to, back to the authenticity point, I think to be authentic and honest about that, because we all come with our own set of specific circumstances and superpowers and challenges. And I feel that it's a very gelling thing in a team if people feel like they can really see you, and that you're honest and that you're real with them. And I find that over time, especially in teams that are made of people of, different ages and experience levels, some of whom are there for a long time and have been with the company a long time, others who come in maybe seasonally or ad hoc, it's very important to be able to kind of really get to know each other in a meaningful way. And I think being authentic has been helpful in doing that.
Would you say that's one of your personal brand values?
Yes, I'd
what
say
would you
so.
say your others are?
Hard work,
Yeah.
reliability. I think it's very important to do what you say you're going to do as a company and as a person, as a team member also, because I think so much of the ability to work well in a team is that you can trust that if someone said they would write the email, they're going to write the email, and it can be out of mind.
Yeah.
And then I think a drive to excellence. Perfection, I don't think is really possible, but some notion of excellence, of trying to hold on to the idea, back to the point about the detail, trying to hold on to the idea that you're going to try and push to make it the best that you can. It may not be perfect and you may get it totally wrong, but you feel like you've done your best.
Yeah. I love that when I was asking you about how did you get into what you did, that I see your origin story of you working at Art Dubai as a small child, these holidays that you would go on, that was really visual for me. And I think there's something that when people are thinking about transitioning into different careers, or they want to do something that they feel is purposeful, they always say, what did you love doing when you were a child? Or what's something that you would do when you were younger that you enjoyed? And I think there's an element that, okay, maybe as a 5-year-old, maybe the beach might be something you'd want to do more. But the reality was you went and did all these museums, and that was your family experience, and you liked that. And now this is what you're bringing to the world as part of your legacy as you go on. Do you take your children to the museums?
I do. Yes, I do. One is a bit small, so I think it'd be dangerous. But my daughter loves art, loves creating. I was never very good. I wasn't like a maker. I was more an observer. She's more of a maker. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's also important is I think to try and then evolve as you go along, right? Because I think that, for example, I've always had a passionate interest in the business side of things, and in management, and in growth, and in new business and opportunities. And some of my earlier roles were very specialist roles. I looked at artwork day in, day out. I cataloged artwork. I did condition reports. I put catalogs together. And it was really very much centered around the physical artwork. And then over time, I think I've been able to merge different interests and passions. So keeping within an area of interest and something that I'm passionate about, which is culture, but also thinking about strategy and thinking about the business side. And I think in that sense, Dubai and Art Dubai has really allowed for that, because I've been able to take an area of specialist interest and then look at broader impact and how I can stretch my skills to try and contribute in that way.
So the younger version of you, if there was a piece of advice, or a woman that's maybe starting her career, what piece of advice would you give?
I would say that, as with probably most things in life, people are really critical. If I think back and I look back, I've had a few kind of key mentors, formal or informal mentors, but deeply influential people who've really helped shape my career, and from whom I've learned some key things that have then catapulted me to the next stage. I think you meet someone and it touches something in you, you learn a lot, and you go, oh, that's really interesting that they do this or they do that. And I'd say that's a really important thing, to kind of seek out mentors or sources of inspiration, essentially. People, things, but in my case, I'd say really people who can help you think differently and who can help evolve beyond what your dedication and hard work and commitment would be able to do.
So by the time this episode comes out, Art Dubai will have happened. So what are some of the things that you're excited to share about this one? And maybe, are you thinking about anything for the next one, or is it too soon?
I think it's quite soon, although it will be the 20th anniversary of the fair.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
So there will be some sort of a party.
Yeah. I'm quite sure. What a celebration.
I think, what is really exciting about it, I was thinking about this the other day, and, of course we're excited about some of the art that is coming, the new commissioning. I'm particularly excited to see some of our programs grow beyond the walls of the fair. So, for example, we have a partnership with Al Serkal Avenue, so our commission is going to be shared between the two locations. I think all of that is really amazing. But I think what's really magical and special is what happens live. It's essentially when the container is filled by people who have all of their own reactions and encounter and engagement with it. So, and when I look back on every fair, that's always the thing that stands out. I remember the fact that some talk that we didn't think would be particularly easy or digestible is packed, and that people absolutely love it. I remember the children's workshops, which are always rammed, and the kids are having the time of their life. Yeah. I remember people coming up saying, I bought my first artwork and I've been saving up for it, or those who say, I buy a work every year at Art Dubai. It's kind of our family tradition. I feel like in many ways, it has this kind of pop-up museum identity that means that once filled with the people and the stories, it really comes to life.
That's really special. And I love that sort of the storytelling piece of how important it can be, the traditions that your parents did with you, you're doing with your children, and that people are doing when they come to Art Dubai, whether it's buying their first piece or bringing their family along to it as well. What a wonderful legacy to be part of. How has consuming art evolved over the years? Because you touched on digital, and I think I know very little about that, but I suppose that there's always going to be evolution. How do you keep educating people in that space?
Some things will probably never change. So the idea that we care about our environment and what we live with and how we curate our life and the role that art can play within that as a decorative element, but also as more of a transcendental companion, something that you look at again and again and again, and every time you look at it, you see something different and you learn something new, and it helps you ask certain questions as your life changes and evolves. I think that will remain, and therefore I don't see a world in which there will be no more paintings or sculptures and all art will be digital. But on the other hand, I think that we live in a world in which the digital is omnipresent and is such an important part, not just of our lives, but of our visual language, right? It's everywhere. And therefore, I assume that for generations, ours onwards, that will be part of the visual language. And so I think of it as an additional tool, like another layer, right?
Yeah.
Much in the same way that at some point, they invented paint in tubes, and therefore artists were able to work outside, and a whole kind of part of art history developed in which painting in the open air, and therefore painting the weather in a more dramatic way and having a more immediate painterly style became a thing. But actually it came from a technical innovation that was the paint tube. I think digital is similar.
Right.
It's an additional tool. I see a lot of artists being curious about it. They're not necessarily digital artists or digital first artists. They may be analog artists, as we call them, but they may be looking at the experimentation possibilities that the digital entails. So I think that this kind of concern and debate over, is painting going to be dead? I'm not really a proponent of that. No, I don't buy into it. I feel like it's going to be another medium that people may decide to touch upon at some point in their career. And then, of course, there will be artists for whom it will feel very aligned, very meaningful, and they will feel, yes, this is the medium for me. And those will be great digital artists that we look forward to discovering.
What a fascinating insight. I really enjoyed today's conversation, learning more about Art Dubai, and from my very first experience that I shared with you of buying art many years ago in Dubai for a client. I've got a couple of quick fire questions, and I think this one's going to be quite interesting because from what we've talked about, I feel that you were always meant to be in the art world. But if I wasn't working in what you're doing now, I would be
an entrepreneur.
Really?
Yes.
And do you think that there's many of those skills that actually or that mindset that you bring into the leadership of what you do now?
Yes. I think, obviously, I'm very fortunate to operate in an amazing structure, and I would never want to misrepresent that.
Yeah.
Because Art Dubai is a fantastic machine that carries us like a wave. But at the same time, I think you're creating universes and possibilities. And a lot of what we do is coming up with new ideas, experimenting, testing, and figuring out what could be next. So I think some of those skills would be transferable. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of the information that you have done about Art Dubai, but also about your journey and the passion and as a brand yourself, because you bring that into the story in Art Dubai along the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How can people work with you, I think, or do you connect on LinkedIn, or what's the best way through? Because I think Art Dubai is one way of connecting. And then if they wanted to follow you, what would be the two ways?
Absolutely, yes. So Art Dubai has all of its platforms, website, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. And I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn.
You do both.
Yes.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and the best of luck for next week. This episode will be out by then, so maybe we can share some snippets if we've got some aspects that your team can help us out with.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to consider your good luck charm episode.
Brilliant.
Thank you for having me.